Hey guys, it's Jane. It's Friday. Yay! I'm here on a Friday for a Friday Reads. Look, I finished 3 books this past week. One was terrible, one was a bit of fluff, and one was a really good read. So I think I'm going to start and do them in that order rather than the order that I read them in so that I can finish on a high note. How about that? The one that I said was terrible, the one that I really, literally hated was Furthermore, which has been nominated for the BookTube SFF Middle Grade Award. I was looking forward to this read. It's got a beautiful bright cover, but I hadn't gone very far before I realised that it was just rowing me up the wrong way in every possible dimension. The prose is sickly sweet. It's twee. It's so purple, it's debilitating. The characters are just awful. As I read through the book, I changed my mind back and forth which one I hated more, Oliver or Alice, who are the only two main characters. But I think that the answer is that it's how they relate to each other is the thing that I hate the most. And then there's these weird family dynamics at the beginning and end of the book, which didn't help either. I at about the 50% mark, I tossed up just DNFing it, but at that point I still was like, no, I'm going to read it. It's for the awards. I don't recommend this book. I don't understand what people saw in it, but clearly not everybody's me, and that's fine. But yeah, no, I really did not enjoy this book. The book that I read later in the week, which was a bit of fluff, is The Duchess War. The author, I've forgotten their name. This is actually a book that I have seen recommended a number of times. Caitlin from Book Chats talked about it. I'm pretty sure I've seen somebody else talk about it. And then during the week, I listened to the Galactic Suburbia podcast, and it came up again. And this is like a science fiction podcast, but they talked about this historical romance novel, and as I imagine I've got the cover art up here, you can see why I was a bit surprised by Galactic Suburbia talking about it. But anyway, I thought, you know what, I had a bit of I've still got a bit of a head cold. I had a bit of a cold, and it wasn't being the greatest week reading wise. I was in a bit of a slump actually after Furthermore, because I just felt blah about life and the world and reading, and I thought maybe just, this is something completely different is what I need. And you know what? It's a really good read. It's well written, enjoyable characters, interesting plot. For a romance novel, it far exceeded my expectations. I won't be continuing with the series, nevertheless, because there is really quite a lot of really quite explicit graphic sex in it. And it's not like bad, ugly sex. There's consent, there's, mutuality, there's, marriage, and yet it's not for me. I don't really enjoy reading all the ins and outs. The book that I finished right at the beginning of the week that I really enjoyed was Nisi Shawl's Everfair. This is an alt history story with certain kind of steampunk-ish elements. It's set largely in Central Africa, in what was the Congo Free State at the time under King Leopold. I don't know whether or not you have any history in this area, but the Congo Free State under King Leopold is one of the most terrifyingly horrifying stories of the colonization of Africa. And the old history change that Nisi Shaw has made is she imagines that a combination of groups actually bought land, large tracts of land in the Congo Free State from Leopold, and actually turned the tables on him at the time. So At the beginning, we have the Fabian Society, who are a particular brand of socialists who actually existed in England at the time, teaming up with some missionaries, but mainly American, African American missionaries. So they have a not necessarily natural connection, but they were co-workers in this project in the early days, coming to set up this utopia in the Congo, which they call Everfair. Now, the King Mwende, who is like the leader of at least one group of the native people of the area, is playing a long game politically at the time, in a kind of guerrilla war with Leopold. And relatively early in the book, King Mwende and his favourite queen, because he has several, his favourite queen, who is a spy and a really great character in the book, join forces with the Everfarians. And the first half of the book is basically this coalition of people fighting off King Leopold and sending him packing. And so the first half of the book is lots of war stories, but also intrigues, and it's basically got an upwards trajectory because good things are happening, and there is some setbacks and whatever, but basically by the end of the book, Leopold's banished, and the Everfarians have won. The really interesting thing about the book for me is that it didn't finish there, because that would have actually made a really interesting book. I think the genius of this book is that it didn't finish there. It asks the next question. Well, now we have this coalition of very fundamentally disparate folk. We've got the native people fighting under Mwende. We have some African American Christians. There were a number of Asian folk who were had engineering technically sort of backgrounds, and did lots of inventing stuff, which is where the steampunk-ish elements come from, which aided the war effort. And I think there are some Indian folk as well, and then you have these white British Fabians, and they're all mixed in together. There's also a quite important character who came as the mistress of one of the Fabians, who at the beginning was a fairly young French woman who doesn't have a natural kind of connection to any one of the groups and does a lot of moving in between. So you have victory, but it's this quite unstable victory, because once they don't have this common enemy to unite them, then the next question is, well, who is in charge and how is this going to work now? And are the Indigenous folk really going to be happy with the Christian missionaries and with the English white folk incomers and with everybody else? And then World War One sort of arrives, is in its infancy, and the Europeans connected with Everfair want Everfair to get involved in the war, and they want to get involved in the war on the side of the Allies. The problem with this is that Belgium is on the side of the Allies, and like King Leopold of Belgium is the person they've just spent N years fighting off. So the first half of the book is the stuff that I kind of expected, having read the summaries of the plot summaries. The second half of the book was much more unexpected and very enjoyable. I mean, the only criticism that I've read about this book that I agree with is that it probably could have been longer. Like, there's so much scope in the stories. So many really interesting characters, and the point of view sort of swaps and changes, and there's quite often different threads that are going on for a long time, and you don't get back to it for quite a while because there's other things going on. It wasn't a problem for me. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a fascinating story, a fascinating thought experiment in maybe what could have been. And of course, as a result, what maybe is possible in some places in Africa, which are still dealing with terrible fallout from colonialism. I highly encourage people to have a look at this. It's one of the best books that I've read this year. Not everybody agrees with that, but I really, really enjoyed it. Since I finished The Duchess War, that's the one that I read most recently, I have started Kameron Hurley's The Stars of Legion because there was, even though I said last week I couldn't get my hands on a copy, somebody very, very helpfully commented on my post that I could get it from Angry Robot because Angry Robot was selling it directly as an ebook to people in the UK and the Commonwealth. Yay, Queen Liz. So yes, I did that and I started it, and I am enjoying it so far. That's what I'm reading at the moment. I've talked for a long time, so I'm going to stop. I hope you're all well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.